So thank you for joining us for this very special Made in the West Filmmaker Q&A. My name is Elizabeth and I'm the Program Coordinator for Cinema and Digital at Riverside Theatres. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians and storytellers of the lands each of us are on tonight and pay my respects for elders past, present and emerging. I am on Wallamadigal land and Riverside Theatres is on the land of the Darug people. So Riverside Theatres has partnered with Made in the West Film Festival to curate and present this project, and Made in the West Shorts is supported by Screen New South Wales. This project has several key objectives: to support local artistic talent by showcasing local filmmakers' work, to nurture and progress the amazing and unique stories that come from Western Sydney, to promote and encourage audiences to participate and appreciate our artists, and diversity and richness that we bring to the screen. So this is the final event in the Made in the West Shorts program, which has been running for the last 5 weeks. All 5 short films are available to watch on our website. And if you haven't had a chance to catch all of them, you still have another week to do so. So head on over to riversideparramatta.com.au to check them out. Before I introduce each of our special guests, I'll just run through some housekeeping. We'll have a formal discussion at the start with the filmmakers and the Made in the West Film Festival team. And at the end, there'll be some time for questions. Feel free to type questions in the chat box, and also write them in there as we go, but also at the end when question time comes up. Please keep your microphones on mute, and also we are recording this Q&A. So now to introduce our special guests. From Made in the West Film Festival, we have Artistic Director Ross Page with us. Thank you for joining us. Also from Made in the West Film Festival, we have Event Manager Misty Mchail, who's also doing our co-hosting and managing our chat questions as well. And now to the filmmakers. From Campesinos, we have Matias Bolla, Director and Editor. Campesinos is a documentary offering a glimpse into the secluded lives of Patagonian cowboys. From Ankara Pride, we have Ebube Uba. Ankara Pride is a documentary that explores the journey of Blacktown-based fashion designer Blessing and her label Trendy Bee Designs. From Audio Guide, we have Elena, Director and Producer. Audio Guide is a short film where a woman is told the secrets of the world through an art gallery issued audio guide. And from Afro Sistahs, we have Ebube Uba. Afro Sistahs is a web series following the lives of 4 Black 20-something women as they work out what exactly they're supposed to do with their lives. And from Culture Strong, we have El Fresh the Lion. Culture Strong is a documentary exploring how 2 young Sikhs in Australia connect to and preserve their culture through hip hop and traditional Sikh music. Thank you everyone for joining us. It has been a real pleasure working with you on this project, and I was so impressed by your films when I first saw them, and I hope our Riverside Theatres audiences have enjoyed them as well over the last 5 weeks. So before we get to talking about your films, I would like to ask each of you a general question about what drives you as a filmmaker. So as creatives, what captivates you to make films in the first place? And what inspires you to tell the stories you tell? Let's start with Chidi Ebube.
Hi guys.
Hi.
Yeah, so I guess this question, speaking for me personally and not on behalf of the team, I think what drives me as a filmmaker is that through my creative practice, I'm able to present or I am presented with an opportunity to develop and present the world as it is for those living in Australia while Black. And it's something that we rarely see on our screens. And I guess I'm passionate about presenting a unique blend of Australian culture and identity by also providing insights to our world, which is, widely experienced. And that's something, I think something in the making of Afro Sistahs that we've learned is a lot of our experiences are widely experienced, but it's rarely seen on Australian television. Yeah, and I guess for me, I really want to be intentional about stepping away from the stereotypical narratives in order to capture, be inspired by, and present a body of work written by, made by, and will be viewed by, you know, the Black community, and also giving, I guess, an insight into our lives, and yeah, providing a window into our lives for the rest of the Australian society and community. Yeah.
Great, thank you. That's so great to hear that insight. Chris, would you like to go next?
Sure. What drives me as a filmmaker? The best answer I can give is making movies that I am desperate to see and I believe only I could tell. And just doing everything in my power to get that film made, just so I can see it and it's no longer just stuck in my brain and for no one else to watch. And also just trying to articulate thoughts, feelings, and trying to tell stories that we don't often see, or it's harder to see just by films in general release and or just that aren't that accessible. So the idea of making it yourself and then doing that work to get out there and show those stories and tell your perspective and then get other perspectives and apply that to your own and hear stories, see faces that you wouldn't often see in most films and that you want to see more of. So you hope that you can kind of start the trend with your work or just see it overall. So I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks.
Elfresh, how about you? What drives you as a filmmaker?
Thank you. Yeah, not too dissimilar from what was already shared. I think, you know, it's a powerful medium to be able to communicate stories that aren't often told. And I think for me, you know, I don't come into a filmmaking space from, you know, I suppose a traditional filmmaker's background. I come into the space as a musician, as a hip hop artist. And so my first introduction to producing something for video was to, you know, create a music video with my little brother when we were, you know, when I just turned 18, you know, so that was DIY, shoot it yourself and then edit it yourself kind of project. And over time, having kind of learned a lot more about the film or video medium through the creation of music videos or being a subject of different pieces and creations, I've come to appreciate the way in which I can use the medium to extrapolate further on stories that I'm able to tell in music. So I kind of see it as an extension of the stories that I'm able to tell in the music that I create.
Great, thank you. Emily.
Hi.
Hi.
What drives me? Honestly, very similarly to what everyone else has already mentioned. Just on top of that, I do really enjoy finding stories that people may not have heard of before and stories that I think are really important to be shared that can also help drive and encourage other people in their lives and in whatever they hope and aspire to be, and to hopefully give them a bit more of a push and motivation to just chase after what they really want in life, like to do in their life. And yeah, just to be able to evoke that kind of emotion really keeps me going when I think about what project I'm going to be hopping on to next, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Yes. And finally, Matias.
Hi. Such great answers. What drives me? I think that's something I'm constantly asking myself, to be honest. But you know, as a filmmaker, I think especially when you're trying to figure out what you're doing, you know, am I a writer? Am I a director? Am I an editor? And which one do I fit into? And I think only last year I realized I just love telling stories, no matter whether it's writing, directing, editing, and yeah, I guess that drives me, this sort of thirst to tell stories. You know, yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. And you know, being able to tell stories of my experiences through documentary about my culture, or if it's drama, you know, my reality, because as a few of you have said, our reality is actually quite global, quite universal. So why not share it?
Great, thank you. Thank you, everyone. It sounds like there's some common threads and common themes there with all of you. It's about telling stories, and something that has a special meaning for you and special place in your hearts that you want to communicate to others. We'll kick off with exploring deeper into each of your films. We'll start with Afro Sistahs and Ebube. So with Afro Sistahs, you brought a unique perspective, an Afro-Australian female and millennial lens to the screen. And the director, Hawanatu, spoke in her introduction about the goal of authentic representation. So what impact do films, short films, web series have on society and the perspectives we have on our communities?
Oh, that's a big question. I think a lot of what we see in general impacts a lot of, many aspects of our lives. And especially, I guess, something that I'm really focused on in my work is mental health as well. You see that, the way people kind of view themselves on screen can, I guess, translate to what they feel they're supposed to be or become or aspire to be. I think that if we only see negative depictions of a particular group of people in media, then over time they get accustomed to that definition of themselves. And so I think it's really important that we do create work that's I guess diverse in its approach and diverse in its view of specific groups of people, and not really looking at them as a monolith and like ever the same, never changing. So I think that through Afro Sistahs and future work that we hope to do, I believe that we can kind of create I guess new archetypes that people will feel comfortable kind of working with in their own films and context. I don't know if I'm answering the question, but yeah. And I think it's really important for me, especially, to kind of create work that I know that, my niece and my nephew will be able to see when they grow up and be like, you know what, like, I don't have to fit into this cookie cutter, like, definition of a Black person living in Australia or existing in this world. And I think that, the self-esteem of children of color is somewhat related to how regularly they see themselves represented in the mainstream media as well. So it kind of just shows how important it is to mix it up a little bit.
Great. And I really did enjoy that glimpse into your world through Afro Sistahs. So my next question for you relates to the writing process. So it came about as a collaborative process. What was it like to work with a team of writers and producers on this project?
It was really great. I mean, I stepped into Afro Sistahs. Well, we kind of formed Afro Sistahs back in, I think, 2017. I don't remember I think it was 2017 or 2018. And I was still at uni, studying, and I was doing a bit of film at uni, but I wasn't at film school. So it was refreshing, I guess, to be in a room of other Black women that shared similar stories to mine, but also viewed the world very, very differently. So it was refreshing not to be in such an, I guess, echo chamber of ideas and thoughts and perspectives of the world. And, it allowed me and I guess the other ladies to dream big and realize that, we don't have to wait for anyone else to tell our stories because there's no one who can tell our stories as authentically as we can. And so a lot of us, speaking for myself specifically, I was very new to the process of creating film. I was still kind of learning, the different roles. I was still learning the techniques and all of that kind of stuff, and especially learning the dynamics of, the industry itself, and how hard or easy it can be for some people to kind of step in and start something and create something. So I think it was, for me personally, it was a really great start to kind of figure that out, and it was such a supportive space as well. That was and also having the support of ICE, so Information and Cultural Exchange Parramatta, in the process of making and by hosting us, and hosting our writers' rooms, and kind of shuffling around to get some financial support for what you guys have seen to be, which is actually our proof of concept. It's the starting point to hopefully season 1. I think, it was quite a positive experience, a grueling experience at times as well. It was I think it was quite brilliant, to be honest.
Great, thank you so much for that insight. Let's move on to Ankara Pride and Emily. So your film told the story of Blessing, a wonderful dressmaker based in Blacktown. You said that a challenge for you in making your film was ensuring authentic storytelling when you are not from the same community as your subject. How did you go about this with your film, and what did you learn through this experience?
I think generally for any people of color, it's you don't want to accidentally misinterpret or misshare someone else's story in their journey, just because it has happened to us quite a bit in the way that other people may be attempting to share what we've been going through. How we tackled it was we made sure that Blessing answered not only truly to herself, but to her experiences with her family. She talked about that a lot in the documentary. And whenever we were sitting in the editing suite, going through the interview and cutting it together, we always made sure to check back with Blessing, like, oh, is this okay? Does this make sense? Is there anything that's wrong? Is there anything that, might be accidentally taken out of context? So it was, we communicated back and forth a lot just to ensure that it was the exact story that she wanted to tell and share.
Fantastic. It sounds like it was a highly collaborative process with Blessing, and through that you were able to get that authentic storytelling of her story. Can I ask, how did you first get captivated by Blessing's story and to then decide to make a film with her about her story?
So the producer, Thuy Nguyen, who isn't able to join us until maybe a bit later, she is the founder of Western Sydney Fashion Festival, which is a fashion show that showcases amazing Western Sydney-based designers and really showcases and gives them a spotlight in the industry. And Blessing was one of the designers that was part of it. And Thuy and her got to talking, and then eventually I stepped in as well. And the more we learned about her personal story, the more we thought that it really had to be shared.
Fantastic. I really enjoyed watching it. So thank you for bringing that to the screen. Let's move on to Campesinos and Matias. So your film documents the life of cowboys in Patagonia. And can I just say the scenery and the cinematography was amazing. It was captivating. So thank you so much for your film. How long did it take you to shoot the film?
We shot the film in over 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks. But it sort of feels like we shot it over a longer period of time because of the weather there. It's just so crazy that one day it was snowing, one day it was sunny, one day, yeah, it was just everything in 2 weeks.
Wow. And it was so great that you were able to attain real and genuine and authentic interviews with the gauchos. How did you approach them and get them to open up to you about their lives, given that they're essentially lone rangers?
Yeah, that was probably the trickiest part of the whole film, especially because I wasn't able to prepare to meet them. just because there was no way of contacting them. So I couldn't, phone ahead and let them know, hey, I'm doing this documentary. Do you want to be interviewed? So we actually did all our sort of chatting on the ground, and we went from post to post, chatting to each gaucho. But I guess the openness of the conversation really took time. And so once I had introduced myself and they were open to the idea of us filming them, we came back and forth quite often. And it wasn't until the final 2 days of shooting that we decided to actually shoot the interviews. So that took, I built trust over those 2 weeks until we were able to actually film the interviews. And, in the interview, I was able to chat about things that we had already talked about, but then also go into deeper details through that.
Fantastic. Yeah, it sounds like that process of getting to know each of the gauchos first really worked for you, because you got some great interviews and some great insights from those people. Thanks, Matias.
Thank you.
So let's go to audio guide. So Chris, unlike the other short films that came about from real life subjects or experience, audio guide is a narrative, a story that came essentially to you as a scripted piece ready to shoot. Could you tell us about your approach to filmmaking when you're working to bring someone else's vision to the screen?
Good question. Well, the first thing I always try to do is shoot film. I didn't get to go to film school, so the way I learned how to make a film was essentially shooting on film, where you don't have a monitor, you don't get to watch the rushes immediately, and you don't get to edit on the spot. You're just really living for every moment, and every take is precious, which I tried to apply to this as well, because I wanted every single scene, because I didn't write it initially, I did some rewrites. I really wanted every single scene to stand out and to really be big and grand, and it's even in the quiet moments, just to really feel special. So shooting on film, that was my first thing I wanted to do, because I wanted it to feel a certain way and to feel timeless. And I was like, well, that's my approach. It has to feel timeless. It can't feel like it was made a month ago. It could have been shot 10 years ago and it still applies, is what I was hoping. So the approach was to make it grander and bigger, and that little bit more interesting as much as I could. And two, it was about finding the right actor, which I already had. I knew Emma already previous to this, got the script. I'm like, no, it's you. And we're going to shoot this like a silent film. So I wanted to do that. And my third biggest thing was working out for me what was priority. Was it the concept? Was it the device, or was it the person? And immediately it was always the person. So to me, the movie's about a person in trouble, and a person who is making decisions that they know will be either their ultimate downfall or their biggest reward, but they'll be a new person by the end. So that was my approach of make it more personal, make it more intimate, and above all, even though I didn't write the piece, make it specific. Because always, for me, I always say it, specificity is universal, where you have certain decisions and certain choices that are so particular to your film and that character and this story that only you could have told it, or it could only exist in your film. So yeah, that was my approach pretty much.
Great, fantastic. And was the writer involved in the filmmaking side of it as well, or did he or she give you the script and said, free reign? How was that process?
So the way it came about was the writer was having writer's block, and he's a good friend of mine. He writes a lot of comedy. And then he just said to me one day, "Oh, I can't write. I can't even write for myself." So I said, "Well, write something for me." And I didn't think he'd do it, but I'm so glad he did. So when he did, he gave it to me, he goes, "Do whatever you want." But I was so grateful that he gave me that script, and the script was so good, and the concept was so great and beyond what I would normally think of or do. I kept asking him questions, and we had to rewrite the middle act, which I had to do, and some other bits, and I just got his permission to do that, so he wouldn't be disappointed when he saw it. But other than that, no. He's in Melbourne, and he said, "Go for your life. If you shoot on film, that'd be nice, but if you shoot on an iPhone, that's okay." And so yeah, he was very sweet, but mostly free reign.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks.
Now let's go to Elfresh and Culture Strong. So your film is a very personal story about your own creative journey. You said that being from Western Sydney, you're often spoken about and spoken to, and very rarely given space to speak for yourself. Did making this film change this for you? And what was it like telling your own story?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Making this film definitely contributed to that feeling of taking control of my own narrative. And I think right now is an interesting time because in the, I suppose, global diaspora of the Sikh community, there's this wave of really taking ownership over our stories and communicating them in mediums that we previously haven't necessarily had access to, or the know-how to communicate through. So filmmaking, music, writing, poetry, like all these spaces are really now being utilized by our people across the globe to communicate our stories, because very much so, I suppose, from the perspective of a person from Western Sydney, that was the case. That, when it came to media, politicians, radio, whoever it was, like they would talk about Western Sydney, and very rarely would we be given space to communicate the nuances of our stories and of our existence, and so and then when we did get a chance to speak, it was often in ways that didn't give us the freedom to be ourselves in that respect. And on top of that, being a Sikh as well, we're a community that has been quite insular, even though we're very much we're everywhere, we're everywhere in the world. Name a country where there isn't a Sikh population. I think we're everywhere, but at the same time, we're quite insular, and we haven't, only now we embracing a variety of mediums to communicate our stories to the world.
Thanks, Elfresh. And speaking about Western Sydney, what is it about Western Sydney that is unique, especially for storytelling, filmmaking, and being creative here out west?
Well, I think this chat is a testament to what makes Western Sydney amazing. You've got a room full of people who are inspiring creators and storytellers, and who just this small sample size shows you the array and the vast amount of stories that can be told from Western Sydney. And I think the one thing that, and I was thinking about this, even from a geographic standpoint, we're so unique. Like from one point of Western Sydney to the, from the top to the bottom, that's like an hour to an hour and a half drive, and it's all Western Sydney, right? Like name another region that's spread out. So geographically, we're very unique. And across that spread, inevitably, because of how large it is, you're going to have so many different stories and so many different nuances, and even just thinking about it from a micro perspective in terms of music, like the music that comes out of Mount Druitt is very different to the music that comes out of Liverpool, and the music that comes out of Granville is very different to the music that comes out of Campbelltown. Like there's and so then when you think about that from a filmmaker's perspective, like the amount of stories that can be told are just endless, and the cultures, yeah, there's just too much. I can't even explain it in words, there's just too much. And so Western Sydney truly is a unique place, and I'm so proud to be from there.
Excellent. Yeah, it truly is. Thank you, Elfresh. So now I'd like to call up Ross from Made in the West Film Festival. And thanks for partnering up with us on this project, and well done to you and your team for starting Made in the West Film Festival and celebrating the work of local filmmakers every year. So how did Made in the West Film Festival start, and how has it changed over time?
Yeah, that's a big question. It's a really big question. Just to echo a bit of what Elfresh was saying, actually, it started out a protest. The festival started out a protest because When you looked at Western Sydney stories that were told in mainstream media, they always had a certain narrative to them. And usually it was of a negative nature, or a rags to riches nature. So someone who crossed over into the good part of town that came from the bad part of town. We wanted to start and erode that. Our objective is to erode that stigma so that people aren't ashamed of their postcode, where they're in fact proud of it. There are so many different views, different backgrounds. It is vast. I didn't even think about it, Alfresh, geographically, but you're so right. It's not just about all of these different communities. It's just so how far spread they are. So we just realized that there wasn't a platform for filmmakers. And we realized there was also a little bit of prejudice about films from Western Sydney as well. When you enter into different festivals, there was always a harder march to get your stuff on screen. So we just saw that as an opportunity, not a problem, but an opportunity. We saw it as an opportunity to provide a platform with a little bit of protest in there as well. And then it sort of migrated away from protest and it moved to a celebration. It moved to congratulating people for their hard work. And then that started to reflect and resonate through the community, and the quality of content began to rise. And you can actually measure that through the history of Made in the West. We were talking about it earlier today in a briefing meeting with one of our partners. And because we're making a magazine at the moment, just to do a bit of advertising while I'm at it. So we're doing Made in the West magazine, a celebration of 10 years of work. And it started out with a couple of milk crates and an SD projector in a dilapidated cinema. And it now is shown in event cinemas with a $4 million projector on a 4-story screen. And I can't think of a better platform to show films. It is the pinnacle. It is the brass ring when it comes to filmmaking, to have it shown in front of an audience with leather seats, with drinks available, and an opportunity to network. And that was, again, just to go back to the foundations of Made in the West, that was very much the saying we used to have is, it's not about the sausage, it's about the sizzle. It's about the event itself. The content, if you build it, they will come. The content would show up, but it wasn't just about the content on screen. It was about putting a whole bunch of artists from diverse backgrounds, from a spread geographic area, into one room to encourage them to collaborate. And collaborate they have. Since Made in the West has happened, more feature films are coming out of Western Sydney than ever. And some of that is due to Made in the West. It's also due to the artists getting together and having the desire to make stories. But it's also us sort of giving a thumbs up, going, it's okay for you to be you. And another aspect that I look upon this is, sometimes we'll get a bit of a pat on the back from different organizations saying, it's great that you're promoting women directors. It's great that you're putting color on screen. And we would cheekily say, and we would stand by, well, we're not actually doing that. All we're doing is showing Western Sydney filmmakers. It just so happens if you draw a bow across Western Sydney, you're going to find female directors. You're going to find people of different ethnical backgrounds that are making films. We're promoting the content in the filmmaker, not where they're from or what their gender is. We're promoting the art itself. And if you do that in an honest and democratic way, you're going to naturally find diversity and inclusivity.
Fantastic. I think you may have probably touched on an answer to my next question, but do you have anything else to add about the impact that the festival has had on the community in the last 10 years?
Oh, absolutely. Like I say, there is more attention coming towards Western Sydney, especially from a filmmaking point of view. One fact that we like to make is it's cheaper to make films in Western Sydney. There is more artists available to help you do it. And you can change scenery very quickly. Like, you could be at a white picket fence in Camden, drive 20 minutes, and you could be at a rail yard in Campbelltown. Drive 5 minutes, you can be in a CBD built-up area. You can change locations very quickly in Western Sydney, and the parking is free. So it is, and as well, LGAs, local government areas, are very much more receptive for you coming to their town to make a movie. So LGAs are more receptive to art being created. They're more inviting of that. and it's way more accessible out this way. And there's a bigger workforce that is willing to work with a lot of passion, because there's a lot more hungry. I find, maybe this is anecdotal, but this is what I've found. There are a lot more hungry artists in Western Sydney than I've experienced anywhere else in the country. Maybe Western Melbourne would be similar in nature. But I think it's that the neighborhood in which we grew up in, and that has pushed us to tell these stories because they're very interesting. Western Sydney is a very interesting place. So I can see the effect that we're having is, one, giving confidence to artists to be themselves, two, creating a platform where they can demonstrate their work, and three, a place where you can go and see other artists doing what they're doing, because it makes people realize that, hey, if this person can do it, maybe I can do it as well. So yeah, we encourage people to be artists. And not only that, we encourage artists from outside of Western Sydney to come and make films here as well. So ultimately, one of our goals is to increase employment for artists in Western Sydney. And I think that's evident in itself.
Fantastic. And what has been a particular or a specific highlight for you that you could share with us?
Oh,
there's probably many.
Oh, there is. It depends what rating we want to give this, whether it's a PG thing or if it's an R-rated thing.
Let's go with PG.
I think watching. I think the one thing I see every year that is something that I could bring to this answer, and that is looking at filmmakers watching an audience as they react to their films. Because there's nothing like having an audience in front of your work and getting to gauge that immediate reaction. Whether it's from a genre film like horror, or a comedy, or a hard-hitting documentary, or a day in the life of film, a filmmaker has an opportunity to see what an audience reacts, how they react to their work on screen. So watching their reactions, watching a filmmaker's reaction to the reaction is exciting for me, because it's kind of like a recognition that we're on the right track and we're doing the right thing. It means that we're inspiring people. So that's the thing that I would put forward, is the physical effects that I can see on people where we know that inspiration is occurring, and it's because we're just bold enough to roll out a red carpet and go, we're really cool, you should come and check this out.
Yeah, there's nothing like, from an audience member's perspective, sitting in a cinema with a group of people and having that shared experience and watching something on the screen together and hearing other people's reactions and your own feelings about what you're seeing. There's nothing else like that. So that's fantastic.
I'll add to that as well as a filmmaker, because it's like, I would watch my short on heaps of different cinema screens, but I never saw it as big as I did at Made in the West. That was huge, like massive screen. So as a filmmaker, it was pretty awesome as well.
Yeah, it's literally the brass ring. Unless you're doing an IMAX film, there's no bigger screen. Like, it is literally one of the biggest screens in the Southern Hemisphere. So if you look at it from a global scale, like, you'd have to go to the States and big parts of Europe to find a bigger screen than that. So yeah, and I'd say another highlight where I'm at it as well is taking our content and putting it online. Like this, for instance, we're getting an opportunity to get artists out and recognized as Western Sydney artists into these online platforms. Made in the West has now moved into Made in the West Online. So we have our online festival that runs a week after Made in the West. So we're taking local content and we're globalizing it. And it's becoming like a bit of a, I don't know, a trendy thing to do. It's trendy to make a film in Western Sydney. And that's something that we're up to doing. Like, when it becomes cool for outsiders to come to our town or our towns, I should say, come to our area to make films, that's great. And to know that I can see in the future, if I look into the crystal ball a little bit, I can see by this online platform will draw more attention to Western Sydney. And the more attention we draw to it, the more that we can raise funds to make more movies. And the more movies we make, and especially with the Aerotropolis going in, there's going to be businesses popping up all over the place. And those businesses need commercials made. They need online presence created. And that's the corporate end of filmmakers. We all have to make money some way. But at the other end of it, there's also an opportunity to operate with absolute freedom and being yourself. So that's what I also would hold dear at the moment.
Great, thank you. So we've come to the open questions section of the event. And I might throw it over to Misty to see if we've had any questions come through the chat.
Yes, I've had a couple. Thank you all. What great answers you've given. It's really wonderful to hear insight into your films. I feel like every time we get to speak to you about your films, we hear more and more about how it all came about. So it's fantastic. Someone's said to me about, there's 3 out of 5 of you that have done docos in the room, that have made a doco. And I'm wondering, do you come at filmmaking in a different way when making a documentary? Because I'm imagining that, you know, you can't plan everything, right? There's a little bit of waiting to see what reveals itself in your filmmaking, as opposed to a narrative film where you might know exactly what you want to say and how you want to say it. Matias and Emily, this question is for you. How does that process work for you in terms of allowing the story to develop from an unknown, source, I guess? Let's start with you, Matias, particularly because you're dealing with cowboys in Patagonia.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really know what to expect with that film in particular. I guess when you go into documentary, you do go in with an expectation, and especially if you want to get funding, you have to still have a pretty well established story and know what sort of things you're going to hit. But I think naturally, like you said, it changes, and allowing yourself to be open to that possibility and not locking yourself into those expectations is pretty important. I think what I found with that documentary in particular is, I kind of had the expectation that these guys would feel lonely, and maybe I actually had the expectation that they'd be quite melancholy about that, or quite sad about that as well. But what I found is that they love their life, they love their lifestyle, which wasn't what I expected. So if I had gone in and expected them to be really, really not happy with what they're doing, I think, I guess just naturally it changed and just uncovered the truth of it, which I guess happens with documentary. I don't know. Yeah,
you can't really, or you can't ever really predict what the outcome is going to be, and you definitely need to have, I found for myself especially, is that you need to have a lot of patience in terms of thinking out what kind of shots that you may need to get. I can't imagine what it was, because for Ankara Pride we got to do the interview with Blessing first, and then we were able to kind of play around with what kind of B-roll we wanted to get for it. But I guess with Campesinos, for example, since the interview was done afterwards, that would have been quite difficult as well. And yeah, it always, for me, comes down to patience and having to be very open with a lot of different outcomes that you may not be prepared for. But yeah.
Yeah, I guess with doing the interview last, for me, it was sort of the opposite. We had shot things, so I was able to talk to them about things that we had shot. And so instead of the B-roll being made to suit the interview, I guess the interview,
the questions
was talking about what we, so I guess it's constantly changing and developing. But then in the edit, you create a whole other story to what you expect as well. When you realize something isn't coming across. So yeah,
it's always a lot of fun though, seeing the different ways you can tell the story.
And that's really interesting that you flip that model. Both of you have a different way of approaching it, because I can imagine that's one of the most challenging parts, is trying to make sure that the interview content you have matches the footage you have, or the other way around. That's great, thank you. Now I picked up on something that Chris said, in how hard it is to cut down the content that you might have, or to and I'm thinking about people being precious with the amount of with the content that you make. Ultimately, when you're trying to distill a story, Chris, I'm going to ask you this, and Elfresh as well. When you're trying to distill the story down, how hard is it to cut the stuff you don't need? Let's start with you.
In pre-production, very hard. As you're approaching the shoot and as you're shooting it, it's much easier because you're seeing it come alive and you're seeing what's working and you're like, you know what? And then a small ounce of confidence builds in you, and then you have this relationship with the actor where you can kind of have this almost unspoken agreement that the things you don't need, we ain't gonna do them. Let's just focus on the really important stuff and make it wonderful. So pre-production, it's hard, but then you start to kill your darlings. Then you get to see it come alive, and you, the actor, and I even dare say the cinematographer, because I work so closely with him, we all have this kind of relationship where it's like, we don't need that. We're gonna save some time. We're gonna get out of here on time today and just cut the stuff you don't need. So that's just my, yeah.
And how about you, Fred? Because obviously yours was a personal story. You know, you there's so much to that story that you've managed to fit in there with yourself and the other musician. And so, how was that for you?
Yeah, that was very difficult. And I say that because, like, it was something that Chris said earlier that really resonated with me, because it was what really helped in trimming down the content for the film, for the documentary. Like Chris said before, you know, it's the specific that actually is universal. And in the initial stages of planning for this documentary, like, I wanted to do so much more, right? Like, I think what I had mapped out was probably like 4 short documentaries worth of material. I wanted to try to tell the story of 6 in Australia who were, through different means, holding on to or maintaining or even furthering their cultural practice, you know, and so and how they were doing that. And so there were so many different ways to tell that story, because different groups are doing different things. But when I met Manbir, who's the you know, I suppose, who's the other character in the documentary with me, and we started talking, and I learned about him and his story and his journey of essentially what he was doing. It just resonated with me so much that I was like, that's it. I just want to talk to him, and like all these other stories can wait, because what he's doing is like is next level, and it resonates with me on a whole other level. And so he was, you know, and once we kind of got to that, then it was just about, okay, well, how do we pick the best parts of the conversation? Because what he's doing, and this kind of answers the question, because it really sets it up and kind of contextualizes how the cut, you know, how we cut it down. But like what he's doing is like, he's a person who's practicing traditional Sikh music, which is the style that is the foundational way or the foundation of traditional Sikh music. That style has been lost over generations through you know, I suppose colonization of where we're from, our motherland, and also migration and partition in India. So, you know, through a combination of all of those, we skipped about 2 or 3 generations of musicians who were able to practice the traditional style of Sikh music. And Manbir had traveled to different parts of India, neighboring states, who, you know, where people of different cultures had learnt our style of music because they loved it so much, and he learnt our style from them. And then, you know, in the process was teaching them more about our language. And so what he was actually doing in Sydney, Australia, was something so vital and so important to our global community and to our culture as a whole, that when we were talking and having conversations, the story was really about how we are capturing or, you know, revitalizing the essence of our cultures through our musical practice. And it was really, really difficult to cut down those conversations, because we sat there and spoke for like, on 2 separate occasions, for like 3 hours. And then I threw it to Entropico, the production company, and the editor there, and I was like, okay, now make this 15 minutes. So it wasn't easy, but we found a way.
That's how I feel about the editing process too. You end up with, like, you know, 5-6 hours worth of content, and you've got to bring it down to 10 minutes and find the best pieces. Does anybody else have anything to say on that particular idea? About
just something to add. I think something that's really useful, especially if you're directing and shooting a film, it's always good to hand it off to another editor, because then you won't be as precious with it as they will be. Getting more people involved in your film will then help you become more honest about the film. because everyone is a little bit more, they'll have more of a critical eye than you will on the content. So if you're directing something, I recommend that you get another editor, a competent editor, of course, to edit it for you.
Yeah, that's great. Liz?
Yeah, I was just going to point out that we have a few questions in the chat. There's one from Carl, and he asks, how should I convince my mum to pursue filmmaking? Some advice, please.
I'm about to come to that question too. It's a great,
right. It's a great question.
Great question, Carl. Does anybody have any advice for Carl?
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. Carl. I think that you should, if you want to pursue filmmaking, it's something that you're obviously passionate about. And you should explain to her that you're passionate about doing this and you want to be a storyteller. So I would say to pursue filmmaking, perhaps go and pursue education in filmmaking and pick up a camera and start filming. Learn the processes to how to film. It's not just as simple as picking up a camera and pointing it at something. There is methodology on how that is done. So perhaps not pursue it as I want to be a filmmaker. I want to be a storyteller. I want to get education in doing so.
And just to clarify, Carl was actually asking, how do I convince my mum to pursue?
Oh, it's about his mother to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, then she must have a story to tell. If she's got a story to tell, you go, well, people need to hear this story. Perhaps you should write it into a script. I would recommend, because look, us as filmmakers, a common question that we will hear in a pub is, oh, I've got a movie idea. You've got to make this movie, right? So I would say to them, do you have a script? They'll go, no. I said, well, you've got an idea for a script then. You don't have an idea for a movie because a script is an idea for a movie. Perhaps whatever story that your mother wants to tell, encourage her to write a script or, in fact, perhaps write it on her behalf.
Yeah, great. Nice answer. We've got another question from the chat, which is along the same lines as one that someone's messaged me too, reflecting on how important, Ebube, you got me thinking about this, how important supportive spaces are as a student or like working with supportive organisations like ICE and now Riverside in this project. And Jay in the chat is reflecting upon the great opportunity that this has been to see your work. What other infrastructure or resources are like missing from Western Sydney? How can we be amplifying the voices of local artists further?
I think first of all, I'd like to say filmmaking itself and studying filmmaking and pursuing the act of studying filmmaking is a privilege. And so for me, understanding that I'm in a place of privilege where a lot of people aren't, to kind of, get the specialized skill from specialized teachers who have been working in the industry for like upwards of 15 years is a huge privilege. So I think that, looking after, I think for me, being in film school, I see that as a privilege and also as a responsibility. And I think this is something that, and I think the responsibility is on those who are already kind of like in the industry or even halfway in, like if they've got like a foot in, you have networks, you have people who have supported you in the past, and even if it's small projects, passing those details on to people who actually want to start and kickstart that process of becoming a filmmaker is really important. And I think in terms of the infrastructure and the things that we can do in creating spaces for, I guess, emerging filmmakers and emerging storytellers is also is instead of kind of passively sending them links to things that they should, I guess, sign up for or learn or whatever that is. I think being very active in the approach by helping them to get attachments. If someone is interested in being a director, maybe you have a director friend that you can introduce them to actually, learn the ropes by physically being there and being present to see this person at work and in action. And I feel like that's something that I would have definitely appreciated as I'm still young, but like as a younger filmmaker. And I think that you know, it would have been great to be attached to someone in a specific role to kind of like see, okay, this is kind of like, I mean, I'm interested in this aspect of filmmaking, but actually like by attaching myself to this person, I realized it's really not for me. And maybe trying another role, or you know, yeah, I think giving an opportunity for young filmmakers and emerging filmmakers to yeah, kind of just attach themselves in a specific role and try things out, test things out is really important. And I mean, like, you probably never know that you enjoy screenwriting as much as you think that you do until you try it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Any more additions to that? Does anybody else have any suggestions? So how can we be working to amplify Western Sydney voices and creatives further? I'm not seeing anybody reach for their mute button.
Sorry, I'll let you go, Emily. No, you go. You go.
My answer isn't going to be very long. I think it's just we should try and just find as many Western Sydney-based creators and artists as we can, and just keep collaborating with each other and just help get our names out there. I think that's really that's a really important aspect of getting ourselves out there.
Nice. I know, Fresh.
Yeah, I was the only thing I'd add to what was shared is really kind of getting behind our community. I think, you know, we have so much to share, and there's so much pride and so much in Western Sydney that we can tap into. And I think, you know, Made in the West is such an important bit of infrastructure because it's, you know, by the West for the West, you know, I suppose in a cliche sense, but it really puts Western Sydney in front of people from Western Sydney. And I think it's, if we're finding that there's an absence of people really backing our stories and plugging them into the mainstream, then I think we should really just, you know, super invest in the local, you know, and really just get behind our people in ways where it catapults momentum, you know, further for our projects. And there's no shortage of great films and great content being created in Western Sydney, and it's just really about getting behind our talents and really, you know, helping amplify them to the world. And if it's cool, can I also tap in on Carl's question, because I noticed he had a follow up there in the chat as well. Is that cool? Can I jump in there?
Please do.
Carl, like I'm not too sure about your specific situation, but what I gathered from your question and what I related to in your question is, you know, coming from, I suppose, a culture where I feel like I'm the first to pursue a creative medium or creative style as a career. It's definitely been challenging, and I think the initial reaction to, you know, our parents or our moms not being supportive of our ambition to want to turn our passions into a career pursuit, our initial reaction is often to resist that and to be like, well, I can do it, I'm going to do it anyway, I don't need your permission. But I think when I've stopped to think about it personally, I'm like, okay, but my parents and my mom just don't understand this world. You know, this is a completely different world for them. Like what was shared earlier is like, they didn't have the privilege to be able to explore that space and to tell their stories. But I'm only able to do that because of their sacrifices and because of what they did to afford me the opportunity to even think of, you know, this as an opportunity to pursue. So, you know, I think, you know, there's an opportunity there, Carl, for you to be able to have conversations with your mom, and it might just be a thing of she has to walk this path with you, you know, like you can educate her along the way and be like, look, mom, this is what I'm doing, this is what it means. And to give you someone to kind of, who to me is the pinnacle of filmmaker from Western Sydney, is a dear friend of mine who passed away. Named Vanessa Young. And he was an amazing filmmaker, and he's got a documentary called Road to Kid, and he actually tells his parents' refugee story. They had to flee from Cambodia during the war and came to Australia. And the documentary it moves me to tears, but it's such a powerful film. And his journey as a filmmaker to me is just, so representative of what is possible from a creator from Western Sydney. And I would highly encourage you to go check out Vinas Yang, his work, and just for a bit of inspiration, and also use his documentary as an opportunity to talk to your mom about why it is that you want to do what you do. And yeah, just walk that journey with her. I think she'll come to love and support what you're doing, so long as you walk that road with her as well. I'll type it for you in the chat. 1 second.
Nice.
Can I add to it as well? I've got one. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I do have one bit of advice as well for Carl, because it's a good question. When you're telling people you want to make movies ever, you're going to get people who are naysayers. They will laugh, or they will say, okay, you're going into unemployment, that's good. They are quite mocking, and they're quite dismissive, because it is perceived as not a real career path by a lot of people. But one thing that this is a good test for in talking to your mum and having those conversations and really fleshing it out is, when you're making movies, you're going to be dealing with collaborators who don't believe in you and they don't trust you, even though you're making a movie together. So treat this as your first step in doing so. Talk to your mum as someone who doesn't believe your ability to tell stories can really lead to a great path. Convince her otherwise. That's what filmmaking partly is. Convincing people that the story you're telling them is the one they need to hear and the one that'll change everything. That's one. And two, just a mini thing that helped me a bit. I try and emphasize to her that filmmaking is not just simply directing big movies, that one day someone will knock on your door and give you a script and that's it, you're working for Marvel. Tell her that the world needs sound mixers, they need script editors, they need screenwriters, they need sound people, they need editors. All of this stuff has work, a lot of it. Show her that. Show her, hey, mum, that commercial needs editors. That needs a cinematographer. I can go to the school and do it, get a job, and I can just work my way up. That's what filmmaking is too. I hope that all made sense. And also shoot film. Don't do digital. I'm joking. Please go digital. Please don't listen to me. I did it the long way. Go digital. But show your mum it's viable. Show your mum that there's work there and you need to do that work to get to those ranks anyway. And I think she'll appreciate that. And tell her it pays a lot. There's one lie to this. Just tell her that. So,
yeah, but you're definitely going to have to enroll her in the idea. And like Chris said, you're going to be constantly, as an artist, enrolling people in your idea. And you're going to get a lot of naysayers out there. It's great when you've got someone who's supporting you, but at the same time, you want to hear all sides of criticism as well. And you need to be able to take that on board. But at the same time, if you're passionate about what you're doing, you've got to be able to explain yourself and why you want to do it.
Yeah, and events like this are great. Getting around other filmmakers and hearing them be inspired inspires you. I can see you in the chat saying, wow, I wish I could collaborate with you guys. Like, just networking, getting together with people, attending events, meeting other filmmakers, talking about what inspires you. That's all part of it. This is all part of it. And on that note, I'm going to hand back over to Liz, but I want to ask you, Liz, because we are about to wrap up. Obviously, you as the curator of this program, you see something in particular in these films. I'd love to hear your reflections on, what you look for as a curator, particularly here in Western Sydney.
Thank you, Misty. Yeah, it was a joy to curate this program. The program that I curate are feature films usually, and I very rarely get to see many of the films that I curate. So it was really, really a joy to watch all these films and many more that we couldn't include because we had limited spots for this program. But there are many different things that I look for in a film that I want to curate. And a lot of the films had many of these aspects. It could have one or two of these different aspects, but just something, it could be a captivating story, or I've got to have some kind of connection with the character, something that drives me to believe in their story and connect emotionally as well to that character and that journey. It could be a film that challenges me and makes me revisit my own values and beliefs, or it could just be something that's new to me and something that's fresh, a fresh perspective on something, or a different angle or different sensibility, or something told in a very creative and different way that makes me go, wow. So something that's surprising and not predictable as well. That's always a joy to see something that you don't know where it's going. And stories where I see things, a few little clues along the way, rather than I can see where this story is going, is really a good journey as an audience member, as a curator, something to look out for. But also for a specific program, curating for a specific audience is also another consideration I take into account as well. So obviously Riverside Theatres, our audience is quite a specific audience. This program had a specific purpose, and I was looking for a very diverse, different stories, and something that could just demonstrate the breadth and width of Western Sydney as well. But yeah, whenever you're making something, you have to consider who you're making it for and push it out to those avenues as well. Yeah, so I hope that helps from a curator's perspective.
Well, look, it's been a real pleasure collaborating with you on this project. Thank you very much for getting Made in the West Film Festival on board. We've really enjoyed working with you in Riverside Theatres Cinema.
As did I. Thank you so much. And before we end, just a reminder that all 5 films are still available for viewing online till the 24th of March. So head over to our website or our YouTube channel where you can check them all out. And that's it. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you to those who joined in and asked questions. I hope it's been a great evening for you, and good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.